All right. Well, welcome. I'm having Kaleena Ruskin join us. She is a movement specialist here at GYMNAZO and our female pelvic floor specialist. So she helps a lot of women deal with what's going on biomechanically in their body, where the dysfunction's showing up, and deals with some of the most random symptoms that clearly aren't random, that are all connected to the same kind of systemic issues going on for women. But today we called her in to the studio to talk about ass out, tits up, and how that little combo, however we think is attractive as we waltz around the world in that posture, is quite problematic for women. So welcome, Kaleena.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so talk to me about ass out, tits up.
Yep,
There you go.
ass
I
out,
think I
tits
said
up.
it funny. So let's talk about that posture and what's going on and what's going on in that posture.
Yeah, so it's a behavioral posture. We totally see it like I'm gonna pick on some CrossFit athletes. Like that's kind of like a standard female CrossFit athlete walk, or even just like power lifters. Power lifters will walk that way. Women, we tend to do it because we think we look good. Like stick my ass out, tits out. Hell yeah! Like I'm gonna parade this around. But for a lot of us, it can cause dysfunction with how we walk biomechanically, with how it affects our low back and our upper back, especially because we're forcing this upright posture and we're forcing actually what we call lordosis. Is that severe arch in the low back that doesn't feel good after long periods of time.
So when you say it's behavioral, I totally get that, because when yoga pants became like okay to wear in public in replacement of jeans, there was this whole, but they make my ass look really good, that kind of swept the nation, I would say, at least in America. And a lot of women wear it's cozy, but like they think it shows off their curves in that way.
Yeah.
And then, of course, in our country, we prefer large-chested women in general.
Yeah.
Like that seems to be the sexual standard that we deal with. And so as women, we're kind of pushing out both curves to gain, or just to feel confident probably in our bodies.
That they, posture wise, we always think we want to like stick our chest out. Like, I was a terrible posture. I was like such like a tomboy jock athlete, and I would just hunch everywhere. I still don't have great posture, but that was like something to force, you thought about it. It was like, oh, I got to roll my shoulders back. Like I have to have good posture. It was like standing super upright.
Yeah.
And what we'll tend to do too, like, is hold our breath, you suck your stomach in. So women, we create so much like tension and dysfunction in our bodies trying to like look good. Nobody really cares. But like butt out, tits out, suck it in. And you're just forcing this whole unnatural tension and unnatural posture for your body. And then you have to hold it and then walk. It looks and feels so awkward, but we've just trained ourselves to do this because we think it's this aesthetically pleasing way that people want to see us or how we should look.
So what's funny to me hearing you say this, because the first time you said this, I was like, I felt called out. Like, oh shit, I actually do that. Like on a daily basis, not just, so like just feeling like I have to tighten my abs and stomach to feel in control. And I don't know if that's a dance background where like you're always like strengthening your core and holding your core in to stabilize the movements in your body and extremities. I don't know. But when you said that, I was like so conscious from that point on. Anytime I walked, I'm like, why am I doing this? But it was so habitual at that point.
Yeah.
That like relaxing, I was like, that felt unnatural because it had been so long of tighten the core, like walk from a place of power in your center. And I don't know where, probably from dance, I got that. But that was like a big, like mind-blowing moment for me when you said that years ago.
Yeah, it could be from dance, it could be from any sort of sports practice, or just, self-conscious women. I would do it. I would recognize when I was coaching, I'm like trying to suck in my gut if I just ate lunch, and I'm like, oh gosh, and you're like, oh, hold it up, hold it tight, like try not to let your gut just roll out, or after a weekend of indulging, you just like, oh, my pants, pull up those Lululemons up and over my belly here. But it's totally behavioral for women, I think. I don't think men do it as much. Guys, you'll definitely see the puff out the chest. like, throw the shoulders back. They walk like the Hulk, trying to
strut.
Oh yeah, the strut. I'm an alpha male. Let me show you how, and puff out the chest. And same thing. We were just like, that looks terrible. Like nobody walks like that.
Yeah, you have a cyborg look to yourself as you waddle.
Yeah.
I should say strut. Waddling might be a different thing. We'll save that for all of us who have ever been 9 months pregnant.
That's where I'm getting to that waddle point.
I don't think so, but at some point you will feel it.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about heels. And are heels involved in this posture setup for women?
They can be. So when we go into that ass out, what happens is the pelvis rotates forward. We get this what's called an anterior tilt. And women are already predispositioned to an anterior tilt. That's just how we're designed. It's for labor and delivery. So the hips roll forward and kind of roll down, right? And you could feel that if you were just standing. So wearing heels, because you're up on your toes, it actually creates that, like if you just went to stand up on your toes, your pelvis would go through that anterior tilt. Anyway, it's just the biomechanics of the body. So when you wear heels, now, if you're a woman who already has a severely rotated pelvis, which some of us do, or behaviorally, you already roll the pelvis.
So far, I'm going check, check. So keep going.
And then you throw yourself in heels. Now we're like check, check, check.
Yeah.
And you're throwing this pelvis into this huge anterior tilt. And in order to stand upright, your low back, your lumbar spine goes into this crazy lordosis. It goes into this curve, essentially, where you get that little low back roll. And we're compressing not only the facets and the joints, but we're compressing all of the tissue. It's like it shortens. Right? If you wanted to stretch out your back, most of us would fall forward to stretch it out, and you get that nice curve or that arch all throughout. But when you're upright, the spine actually goes through a wave. It's not straight up and down. Your thoracic spine is a little curved, and it comes back, and then we get that little lordosis curve of the low back. But when you have an anterior tilt, now you're just getting more. You're getting more lordosis, more of that pinching, more of that compressing of the spine and of those tissues all in the low back and the top of the pelvis. And after a while, it does not feel good to walk that way because your tissues are just cramped. We get a lot of cramping and low back pain. And then sometimes what happens is just the body gets used to it, or we find different ways to adapt. But then when you go to wear flat-footed shoes, or you go to do something like hike, which is the inverse, like going uphill is going to do the inverse of heels, right? Because your feet are going to go uphill. All of a sudden you're like, whoa, my back is straining as I go through this, because trying to go through a motion now that you haven't taught it to go through, that flexion of the hips.
Wow. So, okay, that's like bringing me back to these days when I wore like 4-inch heels 8 hours a single day for years.
I mean, I joke that like heels were invented by men so that we can't run away from them, because I can't think of any woman who is super stoked to wear heels all day, every day. Like, I know there are, I personally don't know any who thoroughly enjoy that, but nobody.
But I will say this, the click of heels is a power move. And like, if I need a little confidence boost, I'm like, throw some heels on, walk 100 yards, and then I feel powerful.
Oh yeah.
Weird though, because I actually hate wearing them. So it's like, I want to like wear them like as I walk past people, and then like take them off and wear flats because it's cozier.
Aesthetically, we look really good in heels because like you get the little calf pop. Like I remember, like as an athlete, like in college, massive calves and massive quads. You throw in a pair of heels, it's like bam, and you're like, hell yeah! Like everything is just flexed to the extreme, and it looks aesthetically really pleasing.
Yeah.
But this is why you go out to the bars for 2 hours and you're wearing your heels and you're feeling sexy, and then after 2 hours you're like, these guys are coming off, and I'm walking home barefoot. Don't even care because my feet hurt so freaking bad.
Yeah.
Because we've wedged them.
They're traps.
Oh my gosh, they're such traps for your feet. As far as I can tell, I've never met anybody who has triangle toes or like pointed feet. Like when you're shoving your feet into stilettos, like no foot is designed like that to come to a point. But yet here we are, because they look good, because nobody wants a Flintstone foot heel. Like just isn't a like.
Well, but I have wide feet, so I already hated heels to begin with, because there's nothing, like they're just shoving you into this crazy narrow space, and then the pointed tops, and even if you get rounded toes, they're still crazy. And I had all sorts of foot issues. That's almost a separate topic, and I know CJ just covered going barefoot through minimalist shoes. But just for all the listeners out there who are going, check, 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 I already have an anterior tilt. I already walk in heels, and I already experience some kind of back pain or I'm sucking my stomach in all the time and pushing my butt and my boobs out. For women like that, like, would you advocate never wearing heels? What's sort of your gauge around that?
Heels are behavioral. We love them and we hate them. Like, there's totally a time and place for heels. I just say, if it's causing you pain, though, why keep doing it? You know, you can reverse it. Just like when we sit for long periods of time, we say, hey, you need to stand up and stretch, right? We need to do the reverse of sitting. You can do the reverse of walking in heels. You could wear flats. You could just, I don't know, stretch your calves out, stretch out your hamstrings, stretch out your quads. Actually, you're going to do a lot of load bearing for you when you walk in heels because of that position. So you're going to have to work a lot on those. Your anterior tib, that front shin muscle essentially, is doing a lot to slow you down. So people don't realize your feet, when we go to like step forward, your toes come up. So we go into what's called dorsiflexion. We land, right? Your heel goes down, toe comes up. You're never in that position when you're in heels. You are constantly in plantar flexion. So you are always hiking downhill while you are in heels, but you're on a flat surface. So your feet are always stuck in that funky position. So like you're just going to have to compensate in so many different areas. Now, if you want to wear heels by all means. Like power move. Like you said, you can wear heels and be like, damn, I feel good. Like it's a power move.
It is.
But if your body hates you afterwards.
That's not a power move.
Yeah, not a power move. That's stupid. It's like, why do you keep touching the hot stove? Like there's so.
Okay, so say that you go, yeah, I get this. I'm totally resonating. I like the power move of heels, but I pay the price later. Like what kind of things do you advocate for trainers to do with their clients or for our clients to be considering to help kind of reduce some of that stress they're putting on their bodies?
Yeah. Foot mobility, calf mobility are some of the big ones right off the bat. So getting them out of that constantly what we call plantar flexed position where the toes are pointing down, like you're hiking downhill at plantar flexion. Dorsiflexion is the opposite way. So getting them into dorsiflexed positions, stretching out the calves is going to feel great. Because when we're stuck in positions for long periods of times, we shorten tissue, right? We can build gunkiness or those tissues just get stuck. Like I said, like if you're sitting, your hips are going to feel a little bit tight when you go to stand up. You're going to get the same response when you're in heels, just in different parts of the body. It might be at the ankle joint, it might be at the knee joint, it might be at the hip joint. Everybody's going to be a little bit different. So reversing that posture. Biomechanically, you can go and you can reverse that posture. Dorsiflexion, stretching out the calves, just like a good old traditional calf stretch. Stretching out the front hip, the back hip, so quads, psoas, hip flexor, hamstrings, glutes, all of that is going to need to be reversed. And then even doing things, because you're in that anterior pelvic tilt that whole time, how do you reverse that? Is it good? Like, well, you can't necessarily reteach that for some women. And it's just how do you tweak and how do you alter how they train? One of the best things that we've gotten women to do that they don't even realize they're stuck in that anterior tilt, they can't roll their pelvis, is to do a cat-cow. So if you do yoga, get it on right on your knees, on your hands, you're prone, and you're rolling not just the shoulders, but now you're rolling the hips.
You're arching your back.
Yeah. And so we can get into that arch. Like, oh yeah, because that's your position.
I'm so sexy right now. Check out my arch.
Yeah. Ass out, tits up.
Yeah,
like,
same thing.
There is that. But then they go to flex and they're like, oh, yeah. I'm stuck. I can't do this.
Yeah. It's almost painful too, like, because you're rolling in.
It can be, yeah. If you've never done it before, or your hips don't know how to get there, or we get the look like, am I doing it? You're like, yes, we're getting close. But I've had to actually physically assist, like FMR, put hands on the hips and help roll them forward and roll them back so that they can actually get that pelvis to go, oh, this is how we can do that. Because it'll just be more motion than the hip or the low back lumbar spine has ever done before, done in a while.
This is good. Okay, so talk to me about when you've done something for a prolonged amount of time, you normalize it. Whether it's normal or not, you identify it as, this is just how I walk. Mm-hmm. And so when someone's listening to this going, well, shoot, now I need to rethink my entire walk. What kind of cues, or how would you describe what to do to kind of get back into a more neutral, natural stance?
Ooh, Good question. I do believe in kind of the barefoot movement, and training your feet to do that. It's not super natural if you're somebody who wears heels all the time or wears really supportive shoes. Walking barefoot's going to be like starting a new workout program because it completely changes how everything reacts. Because as soon as your foot hits the ground, there's this whole chain reaction that goes up through the rest of the body. So going barefoot is going to be a huge 180 from wearing heels all the time, right? So because, again, your foot has to have some free movement. It has to go through eversion, inversion, supination, pronation. Like, you're just going to get all this ankle mobility. And it's going to feel like a stretch for your calves. If you are constantly in heels,
that's true.
Just being flat-footed is going to be this all-new calf mobility and hip mobility for you. That's brand new. So starting there, like, how do I change my walk? Like, we're not going to change your walk 9 times out of 10, but we can bring more awareness to it, and we can change your plane of motion for how you walk. Working laterally, working in rotation, just to get joints moving a little bit differently. It doesn't mean we're going to change it as you go into your normal walk going forward, but we're going to mobilize and retrain some of those and re-stimulate some of those tissues for how to have better movement patterns. Because with 3 planes of motion, we know if we can train 2 planes better, you will inherently get better motion in the 3rd plane. It's a whole trifecta. It's pretty rad. But bare feet, I would encourage. But if you're new to barefoot, listen to your body. There are so many muscles and joints within the feet that people forget that it's just like starting a new workout program, right? We think we'll go do a bunch of squats, haven't done them in a while. Like, oh my gosh, my legs are so sore, my butt's so sore. Your feet are going to feel the same way. But we tend to get scared when our feet feel sore that we should just go back to what was old. But it's just, no, your feet just have never experienced this before. It's new movement for your feet. They have to be trained that way.
Yeah, we have such an interesting relationship around discomfort. It's like, on one hand, you've got no pain, no gain. On the other hand, you have, oh crap, that feels bad, I'm going to stop forever.
Yeah.
And it's like, wait a second, there's got to be something towards the center here that like understands you're creating new pathways, you're creating new patterns of movement, and there's going to be some anticipation that your body's not going to know because this is new. Your body's designed to protect, at least from what I've learned from you guys over the years.
Yeah.
And so as we're building that out, just anticipating that you're going to graduate your body into a new normal and it resists in the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so as I'm walking downtown, let's just play this out. I've got 2 little kids with me. I've got my flat shoes. They may not be minimalists, but they might just be flat shoes.
Yeah.
But I'm still kind of contorting my back and sucking that stomach in, trying to look like a pinup girl as I walk downtown. So what would you say, like, okay, start doing this? Like, is there anything that you have done yourself as you walk that has been like, okay, that was a really good analogy, or that was a really good tip?
Breathe. Breathe, because breathing is going to relax your system. Like, deep breathing, to just take those few deep breaths, just helps relieve tension in your body. So if you're holding tension, whether it's in your shoulders or in your core, just some deep breath work that's very intentional about your exhale, you're going to feel your body just relax. And we're going to go into this. We want to undulate when we walk. Walking should feel effortless.
Okay, what does undulating mean? I'm just going to be devil's advocate
Undulating, kind of that like swagger and sway, that natural flow of the body. The best way I've heard undulating partially described, if you have ever watched UFC, Conor McGregor, he does this funky, like where he walks out. That is a dramatic form of undulating, right? He's just flowing in and out of motion as you go through it. So if you've ever, been on our Instagram or any of our social media pages, you've seen us do rope flow.
Yeah.
Right. That underhand we call figure 8. So just flowing right side to left side. I've literally, while I'm running, trying to relieve tension or just walking, will start that movement of kind of rolling my shoulders back, that opposite direction as I walk, to get that undulating that starts in my upper half. And that usually starts to this trickle down effect where if I'm feeling tight in my upper back or my low back, as soon as I start to undulate, that just helps open everything up. And now I'm walking a little bit more freely. It's a little bit more effortless, and I relieve that tension. So it's just flowing.
Okay, so get into a movement flow. Easier said than done when you look like Bambi all the time with this delicate little, like, tiptoe walk as you waddle your hips back and forth like Marilyn Monroe. I feel like I see that all the time. And of course, we live in a college town, so we get the joy every fall of seeing all the brand new freshmen do their little like 4-inch heel Daisy Duke shorts, strut to the bars, and we sit there and go, oh, I remember those days.
So thankful I'm not there.
So funny. This might be a good time to pause for a second and just bring in the sponsor to today's show, which actually is GYMNAZO EDU's coaching program called the Multidimensional Movement Coaching Program, which is the sponsor today. That's an intensive, almost 3 to 4 month program that a lot of trainers like to buy because it's a combination of education around biomechanics, behavioral science, and tying it all together to create a really dynamic and memorable coaching experience. Primarily small group, but can also be leveraged for one-on-one, or our favorite, which is semi-private, which is 1 coach to 4 athletes. And so that coaching program is something that we make available to the training community. And if you want more information about that, you can go to gymnazoedu.com. And we even have a quiz where you can take to figure out, based on where you are in your skill development as a coach, what education and mentorship programs we offer that could be the right fit for you as you're looking to curate and level up in your career and really build something you're proud of and standing out from the crowd. And so that's today's sponsor of the show. And so I just wanted to take a minute to put that one out there. And then we'll just cruise back in here to talking about sacrificing style for health. Talk to me about that, Kaleena. How often is this a female thing, or is this just a human thing?
I would say 9 times out of 10, this is a female thing. Definitely. We've had, and like I said, some of it's behavioral, some of it is biological. But if you're a trainer and you've got a female athlete who has chronic low back pain when they squat, especially weighted squats, like barbell back squats, look at their ankles, look at their calves, and check that mobility, that ability to get through that load. And then ask them, do you wear heels a lot? Because again, when you're flat-footed, if you're somebody who, when you are in flat shoes, minimalist shoes, and you're not in heels, that is going to be a stretch for your calves and a new range of motion for your calves that your body might not be used to. And if your calves can't, and your ankles can't go into that dorsiflexion, they can't flex, like when you start a squat, it just trickles on up. And most of the time, women are going to go into that squat. They're going to push their weight forward because women are very, very quad dominant. So we're going to throw our weight forward into our quads. We're not going to bend through our ankles and our knees. And we're going to try and bend at our hips. And our hips are going to roll right into that anterior tilt. And you're going to have this huge lordosis, this huge low back loading. Because the other thing that we're taught, especially with weightlifting, is to have a neutral spine, is to be upright. So we'll say it like, hey, have that proud chest up, butts down to try and load into that. But for somebody who even has an anterior tilt to the pelvis, if you're trying to keep your chest up and roll your hips forward, they're going opposite directions. You're actually cranking onto that low back. Those vertebrae hate it, and the low back tissue hates it. So I've actually had to reteach women that it's okay to have like a slight lean forward as they go through their squat, because now you're actually going to be, if somebody has an anterior pelvic tilt and they slightly lean forward with their chest, they're actually in that quote unquote neutral spine position where they're in that flat back and they have the stability through their core, through their hips. And then they can get their hips low and they go, oh my God, my back pain's gone.
Yeah, makes a big difference.
Huge difference, just teaching somebody how to lean forward slightly, because we've never been told that it's okay, especially for women, because most traditional fitness is designed for the male body and the male pelvis. Men don't have that anterior tilt. They're these little cute suckers that just are perfectly level, that rarely have that anterior tilt to them. Yeah. And so they can get into that, and that's no problem for them to keep that chest up super proud and to drop the hips down. But for women, it can be a lot harder, especially if you've had kids. Yeah. See that a lot. And we're super afraid to bend over from the upper half to actually lengthen through that tissue. And you tend to see more low back pulls because that tissue doesn't even know how to lengthen anymore. When you're stuck in that pelvic tilt, when you're stuck with that chest up and you're compressing all that tissue, it literally doesn't even know how to bend over and doesn't know how to lengthen. So when we think like bending over, you're still stretching out all those tissues in the low back and or all along that posterior chain. But we don't think about like, I don't think proper form if I go to tie my shoe. I'm just bending over to tie my shoe.
Yeah, your kid spilled milk and is about to face plant off the counter, and like you go and do this dive bomb move. You're not thinking about your body and how your form is. You're reacting, and that's how, for me as a mom, I threw things out because I was doing random stuff and not thinking about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And your body only does what you train it to do, which is why I love GYMNAZO so much, because we train the funky and we train flexion for what it's going to look like in real life. Now, if we're talking like heavy loads, like traditional Olympic lifting, yeah, you're going to want better technique and better form. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say most of us aren't in our day-to-day life going to deadlift the grocery cart full of 145 pounds worth of groceries. Like that's just not going to happen. But I need to have the mobility to be able to bend over and tie my shoe or catch my kid as they fall off the couch, because you're not going to go, time out, guys. I got to hit this neutral spine, knee over my toes kind of deal. Like you're just going to do what you have to do, and you need to train your body to do that.
Well, that reminds me of athletes too. And so often, I mean, I know that's a topic you care deeply about, but so often what we ask players to do as a gut reaction, like quick thought moment, quick pivot and twist on a field, we don't train in the gym. And I know that's really another topic for an amazing new episode, but it did bring that up for me too. There's a lot of ways that we, through traditional training, may not be supporting the goals of our clients.
Mm-hmm. Or through traditional training where we encourage somebody to keep hurting themselves or to keep pushing through quote unquote discomfort, that's really pain. So like when we
like
have
an
this
alert system.
Yeah, like, oh, just work through that low back pain. But anywhere else in life, we don't encourage people to always work through that kind of pain. Like I kind of ask people like, well, when you touch the hot stove and you like burn your hand, do you touch it again to just see what's going to happen? Or like, well, I'll just get through this. Let me grab onto that hot plate one more time. We don't do it because pain is a sensor for your body to it's a warning, right? To stop doing this, like injury is going to happen eventually. So it's the beauty of modifications. Like you can modify to work with somebody who either has, maybe it's a mobility issue, maybe it's a stability issue, but you shouldn't be encouraging somebody to push through pain necessarily, especially chronic pain. I think that's where a lot of the misconception comes from, like the no pain, no gain, where we've changed it to no fatigue, no fitness is one that I've used.
Oh, I like that one.
Because we're looking for that fatigue state, like when you're going, oh my gosh, my arms are dead from all these push-ups. That fatigue, that burn, the burn of like, I can do one more, I can do 3 more push-ups. It's just my muscles are fatigued. That's the like pain, no gain portion. But if you're like, my shoulder is on fire, like this hurts the second that I lift it without weight, that's not the same thing.
Ooh, that's really good. That should be its own topic, of course. I always like have these episodes and then I think of like 6 more episodes that we could build off of it. That's just sort of how it goes.
We touched a little bit on that with Goose and CJ.
Good.
On measuring pain, like what we need to work through or not work through. But
yeah, but fatiguing versus your tissue screaming at you is really a profound distinction that I think a lot of coaches instinctively might know in their own bodies as athletes, because a lot of trainers are in their bodies figuring out their thresholds and working with that and then trying to apply it to these clients, but maybe those clients aren't as body in tune. They don't know what it feels like. So how do we describe it in a way that meets them where they're at and what they understand?
Yeah, and not just that too, but my body is different than your body.
Yeah.
How I've trained my body is different than your body. So my level of discomfort and your level of discomfort are going to come from 2 totally different places. Yeah. So if you're somebody who has low back pain with squatting, and so do I, but they could be stemming from totally different areas. Mine could be because I have, weak hamstrings, or I just don't have good form. And yours could be because your calves are so tight from wearing heels all the time that you physically can't get that to load. So you're compensating through your low back. I mean, there's so many different scenarios. There's so many different dysfunctions that are caused by different things. There's not like, oh, this is caused by this, and this will fix that, or just push through it and you're going to be okay.
So a lot of different practitioners that I've seen, chiropractors, physical therapists, and massage therapists, to pick on three, all told me that my pelvic tilt was too dramatic, and or I needed to relearn how to walk, which is my okay, thank you, I'll never see you again. What do you mean relearn how to walk? Like, I'm a grown ass woman. I'm not gonna relearn how to walk.
Yeah.
Concept I get, but literally the guy expected me to learn how to rewalk, and I was not bought in on that. But I've also had chiropractors and physical therapists basically say that my entire structure's compromised by this tilt. And then you show up to your workout and you're super self-conscious now, because not only have you just been told you look funky, which just adds to the behavioral trauma of your strut down the street, because now you're like, oh God, I look like a duck with my ass sticking out and I can't even help it. This is not even conscious at this point. What's going on here? So what do you say when it comes to trainers? So trainers helping their clients, and the client tells them almost that same scenario. They've seen all these practitioners and they're basically SOL, unless you relearn how to walk, or you jar your structure in such a way that it gets realigned magically. What is what kind of encouragement could trainers experience on what's their territory in this, and how can they affect change where maybe some of those others weren't?
So good. We run into this problem all the time. My doctor told me this, my chiropractor told me that, da 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 da. And I ask questions to kind of let people come to their own conclusion. I'm like, okay, well, does this motion bother you? We get down to the movement specifics. That does this action cause pain, or do you feel okay doing it, or does it get worse as we continue the dysfunction? So if I put you into more of a tilt, does your back hurt more? Yes. Okay, great. So we're going to have to not necessarily reteach you how to walk, but we're going to re-stimulate your muscles to learn how to work better for you. Because so often we see this proprioceptive shutdown, where essentially muscles don't work the way that they're supposed to work. So when we talk about some of the chiropractic work, people go to get adjusted every 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. But what moves the bones?
Muscle tissue.
Muscle will move the bones. So if I said, okay, Paden, go ahead and move your femur, rotate your femur, you'd be like, I can't do that. But you would use muscles to rotate your femur, essentially. So the muscles pull our bones, at least under my understanding, somewhat out of alignment, okay? Mm-hmm. So you have to not just, that's why you have to go get adjusted every 2 weeks, because we're treating the bones, we're not treating the muscle. Some chiropractors do soft tissue work and they will retrain the muscles, which is way better. But if you're only seeing a chiropractor who just tweaks your bones every 2 weeks and you feel good, and then 2 weeks later you're like, I feel like crap, well, that means that the muscles aren't working the way they're supposed to. And so things are going to get out of whack, because it's behavioral. You're going to walk how you're going to walk. It takes too much freaking effort to think, I need to relearn how to walk. Okay, well, each step. So when you're a trainer and you have this, get down to the nitty-gritty of what's causing that dysfunction. Is it because their anterior hip doesn't work? Is it because their foot doesn't evert? Is it because it's a behavioral thing? Is it just lack of awareness? Maybe they have an old injury that they didn't even think about as they go through this.
They're just compensating.
Man, so often you hear, I've had this weird left low back pain for couple years now, and okay, you dive into some health history and you find out they had knee surgery on their right knee 5 years ago, and you're like, okay, well, when did your back pain start? About 5 years ago. You're like, yeah, you probably have been walking funny because you wanted to take pressure off your knee, so your hips had to adjust differently, your foot had to adjust differently, and now it's just all resonating at your low back. Like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. We go in, we do our movement assessment, and MDMC program does a great job of teaching you how to work with clients, but learning these skills for how to assess movement, and then saying, hey, great, how do we go from here? Maybe we need to work on that right hip doesn't work the way that it's supposed to, and so you're compensating. So it's not, I wish it was an easy answer.
No, but that's why so many super smart trainers sidestep these scenarios with clients, because we don't think it's our territory.
Yeah.
And or they're super smart, but maybe they're just missing a couple problem-solving pieces.
Yeah. So I always get down to just prove it to the client. Let the client feel it and understand it, and let them make that decision and say, okay, well, does your back hurt anymore?
Yeah.
No, like super. So
So keep doing that for a week and see how it sustains.
Exactly. So then you put it into their hands and say, you can make the decision on what you feel like is best for you. Some people like going to the chiropractor. That's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with going to the chiropractor. But if it's this perpetual problem and people are frustrated with it, that I have to keep going back, well, guess what? It's probably something else. Like we can work on something else. Obviously, that's not the one-stop shop for you.
Well, it's so interesting with chiropractors too, from what I understand, is like they'll say like we're treating the problem to reduce symptom, but they see problem as bone structure, and we look at it from our perspective, going, it's part of the problem, but why is it the problem? What got it to be the problem to begin with? Because it shouldn't be just moving around like this in your daily life. And so that's where we go, that is a problem. There's a bigger problem behind that, which is what's the tissue doing to push it out of alignment? And can we solve that?
Yeah.
Simultaneously, beforehand, after there's no other option, etc. And that's sort of where we come in with that. All right, so as we're kind of wrapping up, I have just bringing it back to orthotics. I know we haven't talked about orthotics. So like a lot of women may be experiencing some of this foot pain, go to the foot doctor and say, or maybe it's not foot pain, they're just experiencing postural pain, and they get kind of this, hey, my friend recommended I go get inserts because she has inserts in her hookah, whatever those massive, ridiculous looking shoes. No offense if you wear them, but they do look hysterical, like moon boots. But says the girl who once wore like barefoot toe socks, like the frog socks at one point. So that's kind of ironic. But what would you say for them thinking like just an insert's going to solve the problem?
I mean, it can structurally, quote unquote, balance you out. You know, if some of us have like leg discrepancies, but is it really a structural bone leg discrepancy, or do you have really tight muscles that make it appear that you're just lopsided on one side, where you need that heel insert? Now, I have the world's flattest feet. It's like Kansas. It sounds like a duck when I walk, like you just get slap, 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 slap along the pavement. And I was told, or have been told by several people, oh, you should have tried orthotics to like give myself an arch. But I distinctly remember growing up and wearing like a shoe that had a built-in arch, and my foot hated it. It just immediately caused my feet pain. It was super uncomfortable to walk, super uncomfortable to run. I was like, well, I don't want to do this. So I just went back to bare feet, and I had no issues with bare feet. But I also had this problem where I couldn't point my toes. I would have never made it as a dancer. I couldn't point my toes because my feet would cramp so bad in the arch of my foot. And it's because those tissues were constantly lengthened when they're flat. So they didn't know when you point your toes, you shorten that tissue. It's like flexing. I couldn't flex my feet. They would just cramp, which I figured this out like after starting at GYMNAZO, like, oh my gosh, you just need to like work those tissues and mobilize them so that, and train that motion of doing that. But orthotics don't work for everybody, and it can treat part of the problem, but it's not going to treat the whole problem. And as somebody who had crazy, I have torn 7 ligaments between both of my ankles from soccer, years of soccer, and I had just really like unstable feet and unstable ankles. And I had this idea that I needed to be in a supportive shoe. And so, but when you have gunky ankles that lack stability, or that are locked up, right? They don't move really well, and you stick them in a really, really supportive shoe, you're locking up your ankle even more, and you're locking up your foot even more. So when you have a locked up ankle in a locked up shoe, your body's going to have to get that mobility when you walk, when you run, from somewhere else in your body, like your knee or your hip. So, and the way we look at it is your foot should be a mobile joint, your knee should be a stable joint, and your hip should be a mobile joint. So we have mobility, stability, mobility. So again, if you lock up your ankle and you lock it up in a shoe, most people will start to see knee pain, which is exactly what happened to me. So orthotics can treat part of the problem, but if you are, if you want to, and you don't feel like you can move sometimes, people have been like, well, my orthotics, one, they're a pain because I got to take them out of my work shoe and into my running shoe, and, it's kind of okay, but, I can't move really well in them, or I can't cut. It's because, well, you've changed the the mechanics of what's happening at your ankle joint, where you've locked it into a certain position, right? Because the orthotics are going to put your foot into a certain position, which is only functional for that position. But your foot should have to roll through motion, not just be locked in one position. So orthotics can work for some. I would say they don't work for most, or again, they treat the symptom, they don't treat the problem overall. So we've had a lot, like I was so stubborn. CJ knows this. I was so stubborn to switch to Vivos.
It's part of your charm.
It is.
You're the inherent skeptic.
I am. I needed data. I needed science that said like, no, this is right. Other than like CJ was like, oh, this is cool and trendy, and I'm just barefoot. And
stargazing or sun gazing.
Yeah,
sun
gazing
my lunch break.
And earthing. It was like, we're such different creatures, but like you're so rad. We're just on such different levels.
That's so good.
But I switched to the barefoot shoes, and my poor gunky locked up ankles started to get some much needed mobility back.
Yeah.
And my knee pain went away within 4 to 6 weeks, like drastically reduced. Because I had really gunky ankles. I had to tape my ankles, right? Like for soccer, if you're trying to cut and if they're shocked and they have no stability, you tape them up. So my ankles were always taped so that they didn't have any motion. So inherently, I taught my feet and my ankles to be really good, just locked up.
Yeah.
And then when it came to the real world, it just didn't apply.
Well, do you remember when I was getting a tailor bunion after Jackson, so my second pregnancy, and all of a sudden I'm wearing these super cute mom shoes called Pons. I don't know, maybe in 3 months you'll be like, I'm wearing the mom shoe. But these are like, ooh, I'm like hippie California stylish mom. Look, I don't even try. I'm so cool. And I was like, of course I should have these shoes, which is of course where the vanity and behavioral stuff starts to really get us sidetracked. But it was really it was like putting a lot of pressure around my very wide foot, around the, was it the pad of my foot? Mm-hmm. And so I was squishing it. And I would go on these long walks for like an hour with the baby, wearing the baby, so now extra weight, and chasing a toddler around. And this was my daily thing. And within like 2 months, I had a full tailor bunion popping out on my right foot, and I would cry in pain with these shoes or any shoes that were like really confining around the width of my foot. Yeah. And I remember complaining to you about it, and you were like, you just need to wear barefoot shoes. Like, I swear it's going to help you. And I was like, oh God, it can't be that simple. And I don't know why I was like, that's too obvious. Let me just go on vacation in my super cute brand new flip-flops, or not even flip-flops, because those might actually have been better, but like more constraining sandals around the middle part of my foot. And I go to Mexico, and then I'm like walking barefoot on the beach, and I have this moment where I look in the sand, and there's this warped ass footprint in the sand. And I look at Michael, and I'm like, damn, somebody has like a really funky foot. And Michael looks at me like, you lack so much self-awareness, you sad little person. And he looks at me, he's like, those are your footprints in the sand. And I was like horrified. And it was this moment of, damn it, okay, I need to go get these barefoot shoes and like get on the board with it. And now I wear Vivos, and they make a huge difference. And that tailor bunion is gone. Yeah. And I'm wearing Pons again. So I'm back in my cute mom shoe. I just won't go on long walks in them, and I won't wear them for more than like an hour. Yeah. It's crazy.
It is. And I mean, that's like with heels too. Why so many women get bunions with heels, because it's the same thing. It squishes that toe box. Yeah. And it just, like I remember like my pinky toe would just be like layered on top of that ring finger toe, totally. And it just like stuck there. And you're like, oh, well, that's just how that lives now. And like, you just don't think otherwise until you switch to something else. You're like, oh my gosh, my toes are supposed to spread apart actually when I'm barefoot. Like it's wild how we treat our feet so poorly. Yes, or we just don't think about them as being like a muscle or some sort of like part of our body that needs to be loved and appreciated, even though we abuse them so much. Like,
well, I'm laughing because I've heard so many people go, I just got the bad genes of my grandma's feet. Yeah. And it's like, did you though? Because in my family, we would like circle up and like practice trying to get that little pinky toe in our foot to like spread out. And everybody'd be like, oh, you have my feet. You have my feet. It's like, no, we just all wear heels. We have literally shoved our feet into these heels. Is it really genetic, or is it trained? Like, we've trained them in these horrible shoes. Yeah. And I remember my great aunt looking at me and being like, "You just got my feet." And I like looked at her feet horrified because she's like these horrible bunions and like they're fully in that permanent heel position, these toes. And I'm like, that is not good. I need to reverse that.
Oh, totally. Well, just like wedging them into, and like for somebody who doesn't have arches, I would die going into heels because heels they're sloped, and you're like your toes are extended, but then you have this arch, and I was like, why don't they make heels with just like a piece of plywood that's just flat so that my feet could walk in heels? But you're just in this unnatural cramped foot position. It's so miserable. Like your feet desperately want to relax. Like when you step down, your foot is supposed to expand. Like if they think of them, they're like landing pads.
Yeah.
Like, this is always like the coolest. But if you think of like cat paws, when they step, you can physically see all their little toes. They just land, and it's this big paw pad because they need that support, right? Everything spreads out so that they're stable. But for whatever reason, as humans, we've decided, why would we need support? Let's wedge it into something that has a dime-sized stability point on those stiletto heels.
I know.
And then just the forefoot, just the forefoot, we're like 2 points of contact should be enough.
Yeah.
Like, and try to walk like that.
My life isn't challenging enough. I think I should wear heels.
Yeah.
And walk around in those for a while.
If heels were natural, we wouldn't have to practice walking in them. Like, do you remember as a teenager putting them on and walking in those?
Oh, well, I would actually practice as if I would be on a catwalk ever in my life. Like, as if that was actually going to be my future.
Dude,
I'd be like,
the right mentality.
I am only 5'5", but it's for sure going to be me. And like in high school, I'd be like, let me just get like the hips to go the perfect way. And then I'm like jazz dancing my way in heels for performances, and horrible.
Yeah. But that's why we're not good at them, because our bodies are not designed to walk in heels well. Like, it is a full-on trained behavior that we are doing.
All right, final question. As we talk about sort of the behavioral side of how we shove our bodies into postures, positions, and footwear to look and appeal to other humans.
And our inner egos.
And our inner egos, for sure, because we've said, I have to be this to be valued, loved, etc. Like, what are your personal feelings on that? And if you were talking directly to the hearts of listeners that go, shoot, I kind of feel like I need heels to feel good about myself, what would your message be?
Oh, such a good question. You don't need heels to look good. That comes from the inside out for sure, having that internal conversation of what makes you not look good but feel good. And I think that takes a little bit more digging in, a little bit more self-reassurance and self-confidence. But self-confidence is not anything that anyone can give to you. Like, self-confidence is fully something you give yourself. So having that little internal conversation of, I don't need these heels to feel good, or even asking yourself, like, do I feel good after I wear them, or does this cause me anxiety? Then no, it's probably not worth it to go through that. My husband had asked me one time, he was like, hey, like, how come you don't wear heels anymore? And my husband's 6'1". He's a tall guy, like, and I'm 5'5" on a good day. So he was like, I kind of like when you wear heels because you're, like almost eye height with me. And I was like, babe, we got married. I don't have to wear heels anymore.
I've retired.
I've retired.
The trying to land a mate for life move.
And if it's causing you pain and you like wearing heels, everything in moderation, just like honestly anything else. Or change the type of heels you wear. Wear a wedge. Wedge at least has a little bit more support on them than say like a stiletto. But finding another way to get that height that you're looking for, but not destroying your body in the process of doing that.
And then any parting wisdom for trainers who are listening to this, resonating with this, going, oh my gosh, you just described 40% of my clientele, and maybe they don't have mobility worked in, or they don't have some of the things that we've stumbled across in GYMNAZO that have really helped us in our training program. Like, what things would you say, okay, if that describes your clients, these are some of the things I would have you do in your training programs? Or style.
Yeah, well, like you said, if you have that client who does that, incorporating some sort of mobility, but you can disguise mobility. That's kind of the fun thing. You can just tweak your position or tweak the action to where you say, okay, I'm looking for this exact angle at your foot joint. there are 1,000 different ways that you can get that angle at that foot joint and disguise it with weights or with loading. It doesn't have to be intense loading, but you could do different sorts of lunges. You can go into different planes of motion. You can use a wood wedge. We use wood wedges all the time. I love it. It's super fun and functional for even if you have somebody who's preparing to do like a snowboarding trip. They have to go downhill. Doing squats on something like that, or somebody who needs to go hiking, you have to get them going uphill. Using wood wedges to get that ankle, essentially you're pre-positioning them for success or failure. It depends on how you do that. But you can disguise mobility and you can disguise joint biomechanics through exercise. You don't have to say, we're going to totally stop everything because you need to foam roll and stretch your calves only. Like, that's not going to be what your client wants. So you need to have, sneak it in there. That's kind of the coolest way to do that. But if you got a client who really wants to fix that, give them homework. Most of our clients, if we see them one time a week, guess what? We're not going to undo the damage that they did all week. They need to do something at home, and you're going to provide more value to them, and they'll keep coming back for more. Because if they do their homework and they go, you took away my knee pain, you took away my back pain, you just grew exponentially in their world and gained so much more credibility because you said, by the way, I want you to do 5 minutes of this exercise every single day, or take your heels off, do this immediately after you're done taking your heels off when you get home. Be something simple as just like foam rolling your calves and stretching your calves.
Yeah.
And that changes all of a sudden their perception of you, and that changes their perception of how they treat their body.
And just another to add to that, I love what you guys do after your one-on-one sessions at GYMNAZO. You always film homework in video form, describing it, because it's so classic that people go, okay, yeah, I'll do it, and they walk out, and just like from a client perspective, it's like, oh shoot, I forgot what they said. I think it was something about this doorway and like moving in this funky way, and you're like, forget it, I'm just gonna go watch Netflix.
Yeah.
And it's like, but if you have something super quick and easy, then it removes the friction to actually following through. And that also gets a lot of people. People will pay for results.
Yeah.
And sometimes just that hour, like you said, isn't going to be enough to reverse the damage. And we're habit stacking. We're trying to make small shifts on top of one another over time to create exponential results. So
yeah, and the video is great too. Like you said, people leave here and they totally forget what you said, but there's an accountability piece of it too. The next time they come back to see you, because they don't have an excuse for, why didn't you do your homework? Oh,
Yeah.
I forgot. Well, it's in your phone.
Yeah.
So if you are coming to me and you are complaining about your back pain and your knee pain, I gave you some homework to do. You didn't do any of it for the last week. That's not our responsibility per se. Like, you have to, that self-ownership of that is a huge piece of it.
To all our listeners, this is why Kaleena goes by coach in the back office with all the team, because she is a tough one when it comes to taking personal responsibility for your results, and people love her for it. So there you go. Thank you so much for being with me today and talking about all the postural concerns with women around behavioral issues and trying to look our best so we can feel our best, versus feeling our best so that we can present ourselves with more confidence naturally. I love it.
My
Thank
pleasure.
you.
Thanks for having me.